The envelope Emma Davies carried had bloodstains on one corner, and she knew the man who was supposed to receive it might already be dead by the time she reached his ranch in White Pine, Nevada. She had ridden 3 days straight from Carson City, her horse exhausted, and her own body screaming for rest. But the dying soldier in the army hospital had gripped her hand with surprising strength and begged her to deliver his final words to his brother. Emma worked as a nurse, tending to men broken by frontier conflicts and accidents, and she had promised Private Michael Morrison that she would find his brother Robert and tell him everything the letter contained. The young soldier had died 2 hours after she left, and now the weight of that promise sat heavier than the saddlebags across her mare's flanks. The year was 1876, and Nevada was still wild enough that a woman traveling alone raised eyebrows and invited trouble. Emma had borrowed her brother's clothing, tucking her dark blonde hair under a worn hat, and kept her Navy revolver within easy reach. She was 23 years old and had seen enough of death and desperation in the past 2 years to make her older than her age suggested. Her father had died in a mining accident when she was 19, and her mother had succumbed to pneumonia the following winter, leaving Emma and her younger brother Daniel to fend for themselves. Daniel had found work as a telegraph operator, and Emma had discovered she had steady hands and a strong stomach for nursing. They scraped by, and that was enough. Until 3 days ago, when Michael Morrison grabbed her wrist and whispered that his brother needed to know the truth about their father's land deed before the vultures circled. White Pine appeared on the horizon like a mirage, shimmering in the afternoon heat. It was larger than Emma had expected, with a main street that boasted a hotel, 2 saloons, a general store, and a church with a white steeple that gleamed in the sunlight. She rode slowly down the dusty thoroughfare, aware of the stares she attracted even in her disguise. Her mare's hooves kicked up small clouds of dust with each step, and Emma's throat was so dry she could barely swallow. She stopped at the general store and dismounted, tying her horse to the hitching post with fingers that trembled slightly from exhaustion. Inside, the store was blessedly cool and smelled of leather, tobacco, and coffee. An older woman behind the counter looked up from her ledger, eyes sharp and assessing. "Help you?" the woman asked, her tone neither friendly nor hostile. "I am looking for the Morrison Ranch," Emma said, her voice rough from dust and disuse. "Robert Morrison." The woman's expression shifted, something that might have been sympathy crossing her weathered face. "You are a friend of his. I have a message from his brother Michael." The sympathy deepened into something sadder. "The Morrison place is about 5 miles northeast of town. Follow the main road until you see the split oak, then head toward the mountains. You cannot miss it. Big spread, one of the largest around here." Emma nodded her thanks and bought a canteen of water, drinking deeply before filling it again for the road. The woman watched her with open curiosity but did not ask questions, which Emma appreciated. She was too tired for explanations, too worn down by the weight of bad news. The ride to the Morrison Ranch stretched those 5 miles into what felt like 50. Emma's body swayed in the saddle, and twice she nearly dozed off, catching herself at the last moment. When she finally saw the ranch house rising from the landscape, she felt a surge of relief so strong it nearly brought tears to her eyes. The house itself was impressive, a 2-story structure of timber and stone that spoke of prosperity and permanence. Corrals stretched out behind it, filled with horses that looked well tended and strong. A large barn stood to the east, its doors open to reveal the shadows within. Several smaller outbuildings dotted the property, and Emma could see men working in the distance, their figures small against the vastness of the land. As she approached, A man emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his pants. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes that were the color of storm clouds. He moved with the easy confidence of someone completely at home in his surroundings, and when he saw Emma, he stopped, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern. "Can I help you?" he called out, his voice carrying easily across the yard. Emma dismounted, her legs nearly buckling beneath her. She steadied herself against her mare and pulled the envelope from her saddlebag. "Are you Robert Morrison?" "I am." He moved closer, and Emma could see he was perhaps 27 or 28, with a face that was handsome in a rugged, lived-in way. There was a scar along his jawline, faded and old, and his hands were calloused from years of hard work. "Who are you?" "My name is Emma Davies. I am a nurse at the Army Hospital in Carson City." She held out the envelope, and even from where she stood, she could see him tense at the sight of it. "Your brother Michael asked me to bring this to you. I am sorry, Mr. Morrison, but he passed 3 days ago." The color drained from Robert's face. He took the envelope with hands that had gone very still, staring at it as though it might bite him. "Michael is dead. He was injured in a skirmish near the California border. He made it to us, but the infection was too advanced. He was coherent until near the end. He spoke of you often." Robert did not open the letter. Instead, he looked at Emma, really looked at her, and seemed to notice for the first time how she swayed on her feet, how her clothes hung loose and dusty, how her eyes were shadowed with exhaustion. "You rode from Carson City to bring me this. I promised him I would." Something shifted in Robert's expression, a softening around his eyes. "Come inside. You look like you are about to fall over." "I should get back to town, find a room at the hotel." "Nonsense. You will stay here tonight at least. Anyone who rides 3 days to deliver news of my brother's death deserves a hot meal and a proper bed." His voice was firm, brooking no argument. "Come on, I will have one of my men see to your horse." Emma wanted to protest, but her body had reached its limit. She nodded mutely and followed Robert toward the house, her steps uncertain on the solid ground after so many hours in the saddle. He called out to one of the ranch hands, a lean man with a weathered face, and instructed him to care for Emma's mare. Then he led her up the porch steps and into the house. The interior was surprisingly comfortable, furnished with solid, well-made pieces that spoke of someone who valued both function and beauty. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, and windows let in plenty of light. Everything was clean and organized, which surprised Emma given that she had expected a bachelor ranch to be somewhat chaotic. "My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, keeps things in order," Robert said, as if reading her thoughts. "She is in town today, but I can manage to get you settled. Are you hungry?" "I am more tired than anything else." "Then let me show you to a room. You can rest, and when you wake up, we will talk." He led her upstairs to a bedroom that was simply furnished but comfortable, with a large bed covered in a quilt that looked handmade. A washstand stood in one corner, and the window looked out over the ranch land stretching toward the mountains. Emma sat down on the bed, and it felt like the most luxurious thing she had ever experienced. "Thank you," she said, looking up at Robert. In the better light of the room, she could see the grief beginning to settle into his features, the way his shoulders had tightened, the slight tremor in his hands as he held the envelope. "I am truly sorry about your brother. You did a kind thing coming all this way. Get some rest." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Michael was a good man. Whatever is in this letter, I am glad he had someone with him at the end who cared enough to honor his wishes." Then he was gone, closing the door quietly behind him, and Emma was alone. She managed to remove her boots and hat before collapsing onto the bed, asleep before her head fully settled on the pillow. When Emma woke, the light outside had shifted to the golden glow of late afternoon. For a moment, she was disoriented, unsure of where she was, and then memory flooded back. She sat up slowly, her body stiff and sore from the long ride. Someone had left a pitcher of fresh water and a basin on the washstand, along with clean towels, and Emma took advantage of them gratefully, washing away days of trail dust. She braided her hair and made herself as presentable as possible before venturing downstairs. The house was quiet, but she could hear voices coming from outside. Following the sound, she found Robert on the back porch, talking with an older Chinese woman who must have been Mrs. Chen. They both looked up as Emma emerged. "Miss Davies," Robert said, standing, "you are awake. This is Mrs. Chen, who keeps my household running." Mrs. Chen studied Emma with keen dark eyes, then nodded. "You look better. Still too thin, but better. Come, I have made food." The meal was simple but delicious. Beef stew with vegetables and fresh bread that was still warm. Emma ate slowly, savoring each bite while Robert sat across from her with a cup of coffee. She noticed he had not touched any food, and the letter sat on the table between them, still unopened. "Have you read it?" Emma asked quietly. "Not yet." Robert's hands wrapped around his coffee cup, his knuckles white. "Part of me does not want to know what it says. As long as I do not read it, I can pretend this is all a mistake, that Michael is still alive somewhere." Emma understood that feeling. He wanted you to have it. He was insistent, even when the pain was at its worst. He kept saying you needed to know before it was too late. Robert finally reached for the envelope, turning it over in his hands. Then, with a deep breath, he broke the seal and pulled out the pages inside. Emma focused on her meal, giving him privacy, but she was aware of how his expression changed as he read, moving from grief to confusion to something that looked like anger. "That lying bastard," Robert said finally, his voice low and tight. Emma looked up, startled by the venom in his tone. Robert stood abruptly, pacing to the window, the letter clenched in his fist. "My father. Michael says our father lied about everything. The ranch, the land deed, all of it. We do not actually own half of what I thought we did. Father gambled it away in a poker game 15 years ago, then forged documents to make it look like we still held the title. Michael found out when he was going through some papers after Father died. He tried to write to me, but his letters never arrived." "I am sorry," Emma said, feeling the inadequacy of the words. "There is a man in town, Lawrence Granger. According to Michael, he is the one who actually won the land from Father. He has been waiting, letting me build up the ranch, improve the property, and now he is planning to claim what is legally his." Robert turned to face Emma, his expression anguished. "Everything I have worked for, everything I have built, half of it belongs to someone else. Can you buy it back from him? With what money? I have put everything into this place. The horses, the cattle, the improvements to the house and barn. I have hired good men and paid them fair wages. I have debts to the bank for equipment and supplies. If Granger wants to push this, I will lose everything." Emma set down her spoon, her appetite suddenly gone. "What will you do?" Robert returned to the table, sinking into his chair. He looked defeated in a way that made Emma's heart ache. "I do not know. Talk to Granger, I suppose. See if there is a way to work something out." He looked at the letter again, then at Emma. "Michael wrote that you were kind to him, that you sat with him when he was in pain, read to him, made him feel less alone. Thank you for that. It was my job. No, it was more than that. I can tell from how he wrote about you." Robert's eyes met hers, and Emma felt something shift in the air between them, a connection she could not quite name. "You could have mailed this letter or paid someone to deliver it, but you came yourself, and that means something." Before Emma could respond, Mrs. Chen bustled in with a pot of coffee and a meaningful look at Robert. "It is getting late. Miss Davies should stay tonight. Tomorrow you can go to town together, talk to Granger." "I do not want to impose," Emma said. "You are not imposing," Robert said firmly. "Mrs. Chen is right. Stay tonight and tomorrow we will go into town. I would appreciate the company, honestly. And besides, you came all this way to deliver that letter. The least I can do is make sure you have a safe place to sleep and good food to eat before you head back to Carson City." Emma agreed, though something in her chest tightened at the thought of leaving. She told herself it was just exhaustion, the natural human need for rest and comfort after a difficult journey. It had nothing to do with the way Robert's smile reached his eyes when he talked, or how his hands moved with such confidence and grace, or the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from him even in his grief. That evening they sat on the porch as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Robert told her about the ranch, how he had built it up from almost nothing after their father died 5 years ago. Michael had already joined the army by then, seeking adventure and purpose, and Robert had stayed to work the land. He talked about his dreams for the place, the breed of horses he wanted to develop, the improvements he had planned. Emma found herself talking too, telling him about her work at the hospital, the challenges of nursing, the satisfaction of helping someone heal. She spoke of her parents, her brother Daniel, the life she had built in Carson City. Robert listened with genuine interest, asking questions, laughing at her stories, his grief temporarily set aside. "You have a gift for this," he said at one point. "Storytelling, I mean. The way you describe things, I can picture it all. My mother used to say I had an active imagination. My father said I should have been a writer instead of a nurse." "Why not both?" Emma shrugged. "Writing does not pay the bills, nursing does barely. Still, it seems a shame to let a gift go to waste." They talked until the stars came out, bright and numberless in the Nevada sky. Mrs. Chen had long since retired to her rooms, and the ranch was quiet except for the distant sounds of horses and the occasional call of a night bird. Emma felt more at peace than she had in months, maybe years, and when she finally went to bed, she fell asleep thinking about storm-gray eyes and a smile that made her heart beat faster. The next morning dawned clear and hot. Emma dressed in her own clothes, having washed and dried them the night before. She braided her hair in a simple plait and went downstairs to find Robert already up, drinking coffee in the kitchen. He had shaved and changed into clean clothes, and Emma felt her breath catch slightly at the sight of him. "Ready to face Granger?" he asked, his tone light but his eyes serious. "If you are." They rode into White Pine together, Emma on her own mare and Robert on a beautiful chestnut stallion. The town was busier than it had been the previous day, with wagons and riders moving along the main street. Robert led them to a building that housed a land office, dismounting and tying his horse with practiced ease. Inside, they found Lawrence Granger, a man in his 50s with shrewd eyes and a thin mustache. He looked up from his desk as they entered, and Emma saw recognition flicker across his face when he saw Robert. "Morrison," Granger said, leaning back in his chair. "I wondered when you would come to see me." "So it is true then," Robert said, his voice carefully controlled. "You hold the deed to half my land. Half of what you think is your land, yes. Your father was a terrible poker player and an even worse liar." "I have been patient, Morrison, but my patience is not infinite." Emma watched the exchange, saw the tension in Robert's shoulders, the way his jaw tightened. She stepped forward before she could think better of it. "Perhaps there is a way to resolve this that benefits everyone." Granger's gaze shifted to her, assessing. "And who might you be?" "Emma Davies. I am a friend of Mr. Morrison's. The lie came easily, felt almost true. It seems to me that you could force the issue and take the land, but that would require lawyers and time and expense. Mr. Morrison could fight you in court, which would also cost time and money. Or you could work out an agreement. What kind of agreement? Granger asked. His interest piqued. Emma looked at Robert, hoping he would understand what she was trying to do. Mr. Morrison has improved the property significantly. Those improvements have value. Perhaps he could buy back the land over time with a fair payment plan. Or you could become partners, sharing the profits from the ranch. Granger considered this, tapping his fingers on the desk. I am not interested in being a rancher. I am a businessman, but I am interested in a return on my investment. Then let Mr. Morrison buy the land from you with interest, Emma said. Set up a contract with regular payments. If he fails to pay, the land reverts to you. If he succeeds, you make a profit without the hassle of managing property you do not want. Robert was staring at her, something like admiration in his eyes. Granger was silent for a long moment, then nodded slowly. That could work, but the terms would have to be favorable to me. I have waited 15 years for this. Fair enough, Robert said, finding his voice. Let us talk numbers. They spent the next 2 hours negotiating, Emma occasionally offering suggestions that helped smooth over rough patches. In the end, they had the framework for an agreement. Robert would make quarterly payments to Granger over the next 10 years, with interest. If he missed 2 consecutive payments, the land would revert to Granger. It was not ideal, but it was workable, and both men seemed satisfied. As they left the office, Robert turned to Emma, shaking his head in wonder. How did you do that? I went in there expecting a fight, and you turned it into a negotiation. I have dealt with difficult people before. Doctors with God complexes, patients who refuse treatment, families fighting over their loved ones. You learn to find middle ground. You saved my ranch. You would have figured it out. Maybe, but probably not as elegantly. Robert looked at her, and Emma felt that pull again, that magnetic attraction she could not quite ignore. Thank you, Emma, truly. They rode back to the ranch in comfortable silence, and Emma tried not to think about the fact that her purpose for being here was complete. She had delivered the letter, and Robert had resolved the issue with Granger. There was no reason for her to stay any longer. She needed to get back to Carson City, to her job and her brother and her regular life, but she did not want to leave. That evening, after another excellent meal prepared by Mrs. Chen, Emma told Robert she would depart in the morning. He nodded, accepting her decision, but she saw disappointment flicker across his face. I will miss having you here, he said quietly. They were sitting on the porch again, watching the sunset. The past 2 days have been difficult, but having you here made them bearable, more than bearable, actually. I will miss being here, Emma admitted. Your ranch is beautiful and you have been incredibly kind. Stay longer, Robert said suddenly, turning to face her. Just a few more days. You said yourself you have time before you need to be back at the hospital. Emma hesitated. It was true she had asked for a week off to make the journey and she had only been gone 3 days. I do not know. Then let me give you a reason. I want to document what happened with Michael, with Granger, all of it. I want it written down properly, the whole story. You said you have a gift for storytelling. Help me write it down. Why? Because Michael is gone and I do not want to forget him. Because this ranch means everything to me, and I want a record of what it took to keep it. Because you are the first person I have talked to in years who makes me feel like I am not alone in the world. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. Because I am not ready for you to leave yet. Emma's heart was racing. She should say no, should get back on her horse in the morning and ride away, but she found herself nodding instead. A few more days, just to help with the writing. Just for the writing, Robert agreed, but the way he smiled at her suggested they both knew it was about more than that. The next few days fell into a rhythm that felt both natural and precious. Mornings, Emma would help around the house, talking with Mrs. Chen and learning about the ranch. The older woman was a widow who had come to Nevada from California 10 years earlier, and she ran the Morrison household with quiet efficiency. She seemed to approve of Emma, though she expressed it mostly through meaningful looks and extra helpings at meals. Afternoons, Emma and Robert would sit in the study, a comfortable room lined with books and papers. Robert would talk, and Emma would write, her pen scratching across the paper as she documented his memories of Michael, his stories of building the ranch, his hopes for the future. Sometimes, Robert would read over what she had written and marvel at how she had captured not just the facts, but the feelings behind them. "You make it sound like an adventure," he said one afternoon, reading a passage about a particularly difficult winter 3 years earlier when they had nearly lost half the herd. "It was an adventure. You just lived it, so you see it as normal. You have a way of making the ordinary sound extraordinary." Emma felt herself blush at the praise. She had always written in journals, documenting her life and thoughts, but no one had ever told her she was good at it. Having Robert appreciate her words made something warm bloom in her chest. Evenings were her favorite time. She and Robert would walk around the ranch, and he would show her different aspects of the operation. The horses fascinated Emma, particularly a young mare named Sunshine who was gentle and curious. Robert taught Emma how to properly approach the horses, how to read their body language, and Emma found herself falling a little bit in love with the animals. She was also falling in love with Robert, though she tried not to admit it to herself. It was in the way he listened when she spoke, giving her his full attention as if nothing else in the world mattered. It was in the way he laughed at her jokes, a full, genuine laugh that made his eyes crinkle. It was in the way he touched her arm when making a point, casual and natural, but sending electricity through her skin. It was in the way he looked at her when he thought she was not watching, his expression soft and wondering. On her 4th evening at the ranch, they walked out past the corrals to a small hill that overlooked the property. The sun was setting, and the sky was ablaze with color. They stood side by side, not quite touching, and Emma felt the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. "I should go back to Carson City tomorrow," she said softly. "I have been here almost a week, and my brother will be worried. I know." Robert was quiet for a moment, then said, "But I do not want you to go." Emma turned to look at him. "Robert, I know we have only known each other a few days. I know this is fast, probably too fast. But Emma, you have become important to me. These past days with you have been the best I have had in longer than I can remember. The thought of you leaving, of going back to my regular life without you in it, it feels wrong." "I feel the same way," Emma whispered. "But I have a job, a life in Carson City. My brother depends on me. What if you stayed here? Not just for a few more days, but longer. What if you made this your home?" Emma's breath caught. "Robert, that is crazy." "Is it? You said yourself you are barely scraping by in Carson City. The nursing work is hard and pays little. Here you could write. Really write, not just document my stories, but create your own. I would pay you, of course. I need someone to help manage the ranch accounts, write correspondence, keep records. It is work that needs doing, and you would be perfect for it. You are offering me a job. I am offering you a life." Robert took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "I am offering you a chance to do something you love in a place where you are valued. And yes, I am hoping that maybe, given time, you might come to care for me the way I am starting to care for you." Emma's mind was racing. Everything he said made a terrible, wonderful kind of sense. She was tired of the endless grind of nursing, the death and suffering that never seemed to stop. She was tired of the cramped boarding house room she shared with Daniel, tired of never having quite enough money, tired of feeling like she was just surviving instead of living. Here with Robert, she felt alive. She felt valued. She felt like she could be something more than she had ever imagined. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "This is a big decision, of course. Take all the time you need." But Robert did not let go of her hand, and Emma did not pull away. They stood there as the sun finished setting and the stars began to emerge, hand in hand on a hilltop in Nevada. And Emma felt the future stretching out before her, full of possibility. That night, Emma lay awake in bed, her mind churning. She made lists in her head of pros and cons, tried to be logical and sensible. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Robert's face, felt his hand in hers, heard his voice saying she made the ordinary sound extraordinary. By morning, she had made her decision. She found Robert in the barn feeding the horses. He looked up when she entered, and she could see the hope and fear warring in his expression. "I will stay," Emma said without preamble. "I need to go back to Carson City first to talk to my brother and settle my affairs there. But then I will come back, and I will stay." The smile that broke across Robert's face was like sunrise. He closed the distance between them in 3 long strides and swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. Emma laughed, clutching his shoulders, feeling lighter than she had in years. When he set her down, they were standing close, so close Emma could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. "I will make you glad you chose this," Robert said, his voice rough with emotion. "I swear it." "I am already glad," Emma said, and then, before she could second-guess herself, she leaned in and kissed him. It was a tentative kiss, soft and exploratory, but it sent warmth flooding through Emma's entire body. Robert made a sound low in his throat and deepened the kiss, one hand coming up to cup the back of her head. Emma melted into him, feeling safe and wanted and completely right. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Robert rested his forehead against hers. "Emma Davies, you are extraordinary." "So are you, Robert Morrison." They stood there in the barn, surrounded by the sounds and smells of the ranch, and Emma felt like she had finally found the place where she belonged. The journey back to Carson City was bittersweet. Robert offered to come with her, but Emma felt she needed to do this on her own. She rode out on a clear morning, looking back once to see Robert standing on the porch, watching her go. She raised her hand in farewell, and he returned the gesture, and then she turned her mare toward the east and did not look back again. Carson City felt different when she returned, smaller and grayer than she remembered. She went directly to the boarding house where she and Daniel lived, climbing the stairs to their small room with a strange sense of disconnection. Daniel was there, reading a book by the window, and he jumped up when she entered. "Emma," I was starting to worry. Her brother was 20 years old, with the same dark blonde hair and blue eyes as Emma. He pulled her into a hug, then held her at arm's length. "You look different. Did something happen?" Emma sat down on her narrow bed and told him everything. About Michael's death, the journey to White Pine, meeting Robert, the situation with Granger, and finally, Robert's offer. Daniel listened without interrupting, his expression growing more surprised as the story unfolded. "You are moving to a ranch in the middle of Nevada to work for a man you have known for less than a week," he said when she finished. "I know it sounds insane." "It does. But Emma, you are smiling, actually smiling. I have not seen you look this happy in 2 years." Emma touched her face, surprised to realize he was right. "I feel happy. For the first time since Mama died, I feel like I have something to look forward to." Daniel was quiet for a moment, then sighed. "I cannot say I am not worried." But you are a grown woman and you have always had good instincts about people. If you think this Robert Morrison is trustworthy, then I believe you. Come visit, Emma said impulsively. Once I am settled, come see the ranch. Make sure I have not joined some kind of cult. Daniel laughed at that. All right, I will. But Emma, be careful. Nevada is rough country and you will be isolated out there. I will be fine, and I will write to you every week, I promise. Emma spent the next 3 days settling her affairs. She gave notice at the hospital, where her supervisor was sorry to lose her but understanding. She sold most of her meager possessions, keeping only what she could fit in her saddlebags and a small trunk. She said goodbye to the few friends she had made in Carson City, promising to write. On her last night, Daniel took her to dinner at a restaurant that was nicer than anywhere they usually ate. Over roast chicken and potatoes, he raised his glass of cider and a toast. To new beginnings, he said, and to my sister, who has always been braver than she gives herself credit for. To new beginnings, Emma echoed, clinking her glass against his. And to family, no matter how far apart we are. The next morning, Emma mounted her mare and rode out of Carson City for the last time. The trunk with her belongings would follow by wagon in a few days, but she carried everything truly important with her. The long ride back to White Pine felt different from any journey she had made before. She was not running from something now, but running toward it, toward a future she had chosen, toward a man who made her heart race, toward a life she could barely imagine but desperately wanted. Robert was waiting for her when she crested the final hill and the ranch came into view. He was standing in the yard, and when he saw her, he began walking toward her, then jogging, then running. Emma kicked her mare into a canter and they met halfway, Robert reaching up to help her down from the saddle and then holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. I was afraid you would change your mind, he said into her hair. Not a chance, Emma replied, pulling back to look at him. I am here and I am staying. Robert kissed her then, right there in the middle of the yard, not caring if any of the ranch hands saw. It was a kiss that promised everything, a kiss that tasted like coming home. Mrs. Chen had prepared Emma's room, the same one she had stayed in before, and helped her unpack when the trunk arrived a few days later. The older woman seemed pleased to have another woman around the house, and she and Emma quickly developed a comfortable working relationship. Emma took over the ranch correspondence and bookkeeping, and in her free time, she wrote. She wrote about the ranch, about the daily life of the place, about the hands who worked there and their stories. She wrote about the landscape, the way the light changed throughout the day, the sound of wind through the sagebrush. She wrote about the horses and cattle, about the challenges of running a ranch in Nevada in 1876, about the small triumphs and occasional setbacks, and she wrote about falling in love, because that was what was happening, undeniably and wonderfully. Every day, Emma fell a little more in love with Robert Morrison. She loved the way he treated his animals with patience and respect, never cruel even when frustrated. She loved how he spoke to his employees, firm but fair, remembering details about their lives and families. She loved his laugh, his smile, the way his whole face lit up when he saw her each morning. Robert courted her properly, despite the fact that she was living in his house. He asked her on walks, packed picnics for them to share by the small stream that ran through the property, brought her wildflowers he found on his rides. He told her about his dreams for the ranch, his hopes for the future, and he listened with genuine interest when she shared her own thoughts and dreams. A month after Emma returned to the ranch, Robert took her to a small canyon on the edge of his property, a place he said was special to him. They rode there in the late afternoon, the canyon walls glowing red and gold in the slanting light. Robert spread a blanket on the ground and they sat, eating the food Mrs. Chen had packed and talking as the shadows lengthened. "I have been thinking about something," Robert said, taking Emma's hand. "These past weeks with you have been the best of my life. You make everything better, Emma. You make me better. I wake up excited for the day because I know I will see you. I go to bed grateful because I know you will be here tomorrow." Emma's heart was pounding. She thought she knew where this was going, hoped she knew, but she did not want to assume. Robert shifted, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small box. "This was my mother's. My father gave it to her when they got married, back in Missouri before they came west. It is the only thing of hers I have left." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring with a small blue stone set in the center. It was not fancy or expensive looking, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. "Emma Davies, I know we have only known each other for a short time. I know some people would say this is too fast, too soon. But I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I love your kindness, your strength, your mind, your spirit. I love the way you see the world and the way you help me see it too. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner here on this ranch, building a life together?" Tears were streaming down Emma's face, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, Robert, I will marry you. I love you too, so much it scares me sometimes. Yes." Robert slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. Then he kissed her, and Emma kissed him back, pouring all her love and hope and joy into that kiss. They stayed in the canyon until the stars came out, talking and dreaming and planning their future together. They were married 6 weeks later in the little church in White Pine. Daniel came from Carson City, and Robert's ranch hands attended, along with Mrs. Chen and several families from town who had become friends over the years. Emma wore a simple dress of cream-colored cotton that Mrs. Chen had helped her make, with wildflowers in her hair. Robert wore his best suit, and he could not stop grinning the entire ceremony. Emma's hand trembled slightly as they exchanged vows, not from fear but from the overwhelming rightness of the moment. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Robert kissed her with such tenderness that several of the women in attendance sighed. The reception was held at the ranch, with long tables set up in the yard and more food than Emma thought possible. There was music and dancing and laughter, and as the sun set and lanterns were lit, Emma danced with her new husband under the stars, feeling like the luckiest woman alive. "Happy," Robert murmured in her ear as they swayed to the music. "Impossibly so," Emma replied. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible." He pulled back to look at her, his gray eyes warm in the lantern light. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for taking a chance on me on this life." "Thank you for asking me to stay," Emma said. "Thank you for seeing something in me I did not even see in myself." They kissed, and around them their friends and family cheered. That night, alone together for the first time as husband and wife, Robert carried Emma over the threshold of their bedroom. He set her down gently, and they stood facing each other, the air charged with anticipation and a hint of nervousness. "I want you to be happy here," Robert said softly. "Always. If there is anything you need, anything I can do to make your life better, you only have to tell me." Emma reached up to touch his face, tracing the line of his jaw. "I am already happy. You make me happy, Robert. This life we are building makes me happy." They came together then, learning each other in the intimate darkness, discovering the ways their bodies fit and the sounds they made in pleasure. It was tender and passionate and awkward and perfect, and afterward, lying in Robert's arms with her head on his chest, Emma felt a completeness she had never experienced before. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Robert replied, his arms tightening around her. My extraordinary Emma. The first year of their marriage was a period of adjustment and growth. Emma continued to write, documenting the life of the ranch with increasing skill. She began to submit some of her pieces to newspapers in Carson City and even San Francisco, and to her amazement, they were accepted. She did not make much money from the writing, but seeing her words in print was a thrill that never got old. She also became an integral part of running the ranch. Her talent with numbers and organization proved invaluable, and Robert increasingly relied on her input for major decisions. They made a good team, balancing each other's strengths and weaknesses. Where Robert was impulsive, Emma was measured. Where Emma was cautious, Robert encouraged her to take risks. They learned to argue constructively, to communicate clearly, to forgive quickly. They learned each other's habits and moods, what made each other laugh and what caused stress. They built a partnership that went far beyond romance. Though the romance was still there, still strong, Emma also became close with the ranch hands and their families. She started a small school for the children, teaching them reading and writing in the evenings. She helped Mrs. Chen with the cooking and preserving in the fall. She learned to ride better, even to help with some of the lighter ranch work. She found herself becoming part of a community in a way she never had in Carson City. Daniel visited twice that first year, and Emma was relieved to see that he and Robert got along well. Her brother seemed satisfied that she was happy and well cared for, though he teased her mercilessly about how domestic she had become. "Never thought I would see the day when my sister would be excited about making preserves," he said during his second visit. "Never thought I would be excited about it either," Emma admitted with a laugh. "But there is something satisfying about it, seeing the shelves in the cellar lined with jars, knowing we will have food all winter." "You have changed," Daniel said, but his tone was approving. "You seem settled." "Content. I am. This is where I am meant to be, Daniel. I am sure of it." The first real test of Emma and Robert's marriage came in their second year together. A drought hit Nevada hard, and by midsummer, the streams were running low and the grass was brown and brittle. The cattle were losing weight and the horses were restless. Robert worried constantly, his face drawn and tired from the stress. Emma watched him work himself to exhaustion, trying to do everything himself. Finally, one night after he came in past midnight, she confronted him. "You cannot do this alone," she said, helping him out of his boots. "You have good men working for you. Trust them to help. It is my ranch, my responsibility." "It is our ranch," Emma corrected firmly. "Ours, Robert. And you have to let people help you, or you will kill yourself trying to do everything." Robert looked at her, and she saw the fear behind his exhaustion. "What if I cannot save it? What if I lose the ranch after everything we have been through?" Emma took his hands in hers. "Then we will figure something else out. Together. But I do not think it will come to that. You are too stubborn and too smart to let a drought beat you." Her faith in him seemed to give Robert strength. He started delegating more, trusting his foremen and hands to handle tasks he had been trying to do himself. Emma worked with him on the finances, finding ways to cut costs without sacrificing the welfare of the animals or employees. They sold off some of the cattle before they got too thin, taking a loss but ensuring they could feed the remaining stock. It was a hard summer and an anxious fall, but they made it through. When the rains finally came in October, Emma and Robert stood on the porch and watched the water pour from the sky, holding each other tight, both crying with relief. "We did it," Robert said, his voice choked. "We survived." "We did," Emma agreed, "because we did it together." That winter, snug and warm in their home with the pantry full and the animals healthy, Emma discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks but wanted to be sure before saying anything. When she finally told Robert, His reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He stared at her for a moment as if he could not quite process the words, and then he let out a whoop of joy that probably scared the horses in the barn. He picked Emma up and spun her around, then immediately set her down, looking panicked. "Should I have done that? Did I hurt you? The baby?" Emma laughed, tears of happiness streaming down her face. "We are fine. I am fine. But yes, maybe save the spinning for after the baby is born." "We are having a baby," Robert said, wonder in his voice. He placed his hand gently on Emma's stomach, even though there was no visible change yet. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Emma asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it. Emma, you have given me so much already. This, a child, our child, it is more than I ever dreamed of," they told Mrs. Chen that evening, and the older woman's face cracked into the widest smile Emma had ever seen from her. She immediately began planning, talking about what the baby would need, what Emma should eat, how to prepare. Emma let her fuss, touched by the affection behind the worrying. The pregnancy was relatively easy, for which Emma was grateful. She continued to work and write, though she tired more easily and had to take frequent rests. Robert became even more protective, constantly checking on her, making sure she was not overexerting herself. Emma found it both endearing and occasionally frustrating, but she could not really be annoyed given how much he clearly cared. Daniel visited in the spring, and Emma delighted in telling him he was going to be an uncle. Her brother looked stunned, then broke into a grin. "A baby, Morrison. That is going to be one stubborn, smart, articulate child. Let us hope they get my looks and Robert's disposition," Emma joked. "Hey, I have a perfectly fine disposition," Robert protested, and they all laughed. As Emma's body changed and grew, she continued to write, documenting the experience of pregnancy, the anticipation of motherhood, the way it felt to carry a new life inside her. She wrote about her fears, too, the worry that she would not be a good mother, that something would go wrong. Writing helped her process those feelings, and Robert's constant reassurance helped even more. On a warm July evening in 1878, Emma went into labor. Mrs. Chen and the doctor from White Pine attended her, and Robert paced outside the bedroom door, looking more frightened than Emma had ever seen him. The labor was long and difficult, stretching through the night and into the next day. There were moments when Emma thought she could not do it, could not go on, but then she would hear Robert's voice through the door, encouraging her, and she found the strength to continue. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, Emma gave birth to a son. The baby came out red and squalling, with a shock of dark hair and lungs that worked perfectly. The doctor placed him on Emma's chest, and she looked down at her son, overwhelmed by a love so fierce and immediate it took her breath away. "Robert," she called weakly. "Let him in." Robert practically fell through the door in his hurry to get to her side. He looked at Emma first, his eyes searching her face for signs of distress, and only when he seemed satisfied that she was all right did he look at the baby. His expression transformed into something Emma would remember for the rest of her life, a mixture of awe and joy and protective love so powerful it seemed to fill the room. "He is beautiful," Robert whispered. "Emma, he is perfect. Want to hold your son?" The doctor asked, and Robert nodded mutely, holding out his arms. The doctor showed him how to support the baby's head, and then the infant was in Robert's arms, looking impossibly tiny against his father's broad chest. "Hello, little one," Robert said softly. "I am your papa. I am going to do my best to be a good one. And this amazing woman here, she is your mama, and she is the bravest, strongest person I have ever met." Emma felt tears sliding down her face, too exhausted and emotional to stop them. What should we name him? They had discussed names but never quite settled on one. Robert looked down at his son, then at Emma. "Michael, if that is all right with you, after my brother, he brought us together in a way." Emma nodded, her throat too tight to speak. It was perfect. Michael Morrison, named for the uncle who had died and, in dying, changed all their lives. Young Michael was a healthy baby, and the household quickly reorganized itself around him. Emma was exhausted those first few months, overwhelmed by the constant demands of nursing and caring for an infant. There were nights when she cried from sheer tiredness, and days when she felt like she had no idea what she was doing. But Robert was there, always there, helping however he could. He walked Michael through the house when the baby was fussy, sang him lullabies in a surprisingly pleasant baritone, changed diapers without complaint. Mrs. Chen helped too, giving Emma breaks and teaching her tricks for soothing the baby. The whole household, it seemed, had fallen in love with young Michael. As the weeks passed and Emma adjusted to motherhood, she began to find her rhythm again. She started writing once more, though less frequently, capturing the moments of Michael's infancy. She wrote about the first time he smiled at her, the way Robert's face lit up when he saw his son, the strange new shape of her body and life. She sent one of her pieces to a newspaper in San Francisco, an essay about motherhood on a Nevada ranch. To her shock, they not only published it but asked for more. Suddenly, Emma found herself with a regular assignment, writing a monthly column about ranch life and family. The payment was modest but steady, and seeing her name in print, knowing people across California and Nevada were reading her words, was thrilling. "My wife, the famous writer," Robert teased one evening, reading her latest published piece. "Hardly famous," Emma said, but she was pleased. "You will be. These are good, Emma, really good. You have a voice people want to hear." Michael grew quickly, reaching each milestone right on time. He was a happy baby, quick to smile and laugh, with Robert's gray eyes and Emma's nose. Emma loved watching Robert with their son, seeing the tenderness and patience he brought to fatherhood. It made her fall in love with him all over again, this new dimension of the man she had married. When Michael was 6 months old, Emma discovered she was pregnant again. It was sooner than she had planned, and she felt a moment of panic at the thought of 2 babies so close in age. But Robert was thrilled, and Emma found herself getting excited too. Their daughter Lily was born in the spring of 1879, with much less drama than Michael's birth. She was a small baby, delicate and lovely, with wisps of blonde hair and eyes that gradually turned blue like Emma's. If Michael was their easy child, Lily was their challenging one, fussy and particular from the start. But she was also affectionate and charming when she wanted to be, wrapping everyone around her tiny finger. Emma's life became a blur of feeding and changing and soothing, of stolen moments to write and exhausted collapses into bed at night. Robert hired a young woman from town to help with the children, a practical girl named Sarah who was wonderful with babies. Emma was grateful for the help, though she sometimes felt guilty for needing it. "You are doing amazing," Robert told her one night when she voiced these feelings. "You are raising 2 children, running a household, managing the ranch books, and still writing. You are not Superwoman, Emma. You are allowed to need help. I know. I just feel like I should be able to do it all." "Why? Who said you have to do it all alone?" Robert pulled her close. "We are a team, remember? Let me help. Let Sarah help. Let Mrs. Chen help. That does not make you weak or inadequate. It makes you smart." Emma rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the tension ease out of her body. "When did you get so wise?" "I married a wise woman. It rubbed off on me." As the children grew, the ranch continued to thrive. Robert's careful management and Emma's financial acumen meant they were not only surviving but prospering. They added to the herd, improved the breeding program for the horses, and expanded the ranch house to accommodate their growing family. Emma's writing career continued to develop, and she even had a few pieces picked up by larger Eastern newspapers. Life was not always easy. There were years when money was tight, when weather was harsh, when illness swept through the family or the ranch hands. There were arguments and disagreements, moments of frustration and stress. Michael broke his arm falling from a fence when he was 4, and Emma thought her heart would stop from fear. Lily developed a high fever at 2 that had them terrified for days until it broke. But through it all, Emma and Robert faced everything together. They had built a true partnership, a marriage that was equal parts love and friendship and practical teamwork. They still made time for each other, still stole moments alone when the children were asleep, still looked at each other across a crowded room and smiled at some shared joke or memory. When Michael was 5 and Lily was 4, Emma had a third child, another boy they named Daniel after Emma's brother. Daniel was a quiet, thoughtful baby who seemed content to observe the world around him. He had Robert's dark hair and Emma's blue eyes, and a sweet disposition that made him easy to love. Emma was 32 years old, mother of 3, wife to a successful rancher, and an established writer with a growing reputation. Sometimes she thought about the young woman who had ridden to White Pine 7 years earlier to deliver a message, exhausted and uncertain and just trying to survive. That Emma felt like a different person, someone from another life. "You ever miss it?" Robert asked her one evening. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset as they had done so many times over the years. The children were asleep inside, the ranch was quiet, and the world felt peaceful. "Miss what?" "Nursing. Your old life in Carson City. Sometimes I worry that I took you away from something you loved." Emma considered the question carefully. "I do not miss the nursing, not really. It was meaningful work, but it was also hard and sad more often than not. And Carson City was never home, not the way this place is. I was surviving there. Here I am living. No regrets then." Emma leaned against him, feeling his arm come around her shoulders. "Not a single one. That young soldier who asked me to deliver his letter, your brother Michael, he gave me the greatest gift imaginable. He brought me here to you, to this life. How could I regret any of it?" "I think about him sometimes," Robert said quietly. "Wonder what his life would have been like if he had survived, if he would have married, had children of his own. I think he would have been a wonderful uncle to our kids, and I think he would be proud of you, of what you have built here." Robert kissed the top of Emma's head. "We built it, you and me together." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, and Emma thought about how far they had come. The ranch that Robert had almost lost was now one of the most successful in the region. The man who had been so alone was now surrounded by family and love. The woman who had felt purposeless had found her calling as a writer and mother. Over the next few years, Emma's writing career took an unexpected turn. A publisher in New York read some of her pieces and wrote to her, asking if she would consider writing a book about ranch life in Nevada. Emma was stunned by the offer and immediately agreed. She spent the next year working on the manuscript, writing during nap time and after the children were in bed, documenting the life she and Robert had built together. The book was published in 1884 and was a modest success, selling well enough that the publisher asked for another. Emma found herself with a second career, one that she could do from home while raising her children. She wrote about the West, about ranch life, about the challenges and rewards of building a home in harsh country. Her books were praised for their authenticity and heart, and Emma discovered that her story, their story, resonated with people across the country. Robert was immensely proud of her success, showing her books to anyone who visited and keeping every review that mentioned her name. Emma treasured his support, knowing how rare it was to have a husband who encouraged rather than resented his wife's accomplishments. Their children grew up strong and healthy, shaped by the ranch and the values their parents instilled. Michael was adventurous and bold, always pushing boundaries and testing limits. Lily was clever and determined, with a will of iron beneath her pretty exterior. Daniel was thoughtful and kind, with a gift for working with animals that reminded Emma of his father. Emma taught them all to read and write, instilling in them a love of learning and stories. Robert taught them to ride and rope, to understand the land and animals, to work hard and treat people fairly. Between the two of them, they raised children who were confident and capable, ready to face whatever the world threw at them. When Emma was 37, she had a fourth child, a surprise daughter they named Catherine. The pregnancy was harder than the previous ones, and Emma felt her age in a way she had not before. But Catherine was worth it, a bright spark of a child with boundless energy and curiosity. Emma's brother Daniel married finally at 32, wedding a schoolteacher from Sacramento. They settled in Carson City, and Daniel continued his work with the telegraph office while his wife taught. They had 2 daughters, and the cousins visited back and forth regularly, forming close bonds. The Morrison Ranch became known throughout Nevada as one of the best-run operations in the state. Robert's horses were sought after for their quality and temperament, and the cattle operation was profitable even in difficult years. Robert trained several of his ranch hands to take on increasing responsibility, building a team he could trust. Emma's writing brought in additional income and raised the profile of the ranch, with people sometimes visiting just to meet the author they had read about. As Emma approached 40, she found herself reflecting on the decade and a half since she had first arrived at the ranch. She had lived a lifetime in those years, experienced joys and sorrows she could never have imagined. She had become a wife, a mother, a writer, a partner in a thriving business. She had found love and purpose and a home that felt more real than any place she had lived before. One evening, after tucking Catherine into bed and checking on the older children, Emma returned to the bedroom she shared with Robert. He was already there, reading by lamplight, and he looked up when she entered. "Everyone asleep?" he asked, finally. "I think Michael was testing me tonight, asking for 17 glasses of water." Robert laughed. "He gets that from you, you know, that stubborn streak. He gets it from both of us, and you know it." Emma sat on the bed, suddenly feeling the weight of the day. "Robert, can I ask you something?" "Always. Do you remember the day we met? When I rode up exhausted and dusty to deliver that letter? I remember everything about that day. You looked half dead on your feet, but you had come all that way to keep a promise. I think I started falling in love with you right then, even though I did not know it yet." Emma felt warmth spread through her chest. Even after all these years, Robert could still make her feel cherished with just a few words. "I keep thinking about how easily things could have been different. If Michael had asked someone else to deliver the letter, if I had mailed it instead of bringing it personally, if you had not asked me to stay. But you did come, and I did ask you to stay. Some things are meant to be, Emma. You think Michael somehow knew that bringing us together was part of his plan." Robert set aside his book, giving her his full attention. "I do not know if he planned it, but I think he gave us a gift, whether he meant to or not. He sent me you, and you changed everything." Emma moved to sit beside him, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I want to write it down, our story. The real story from the beginning to now, for the children so they know how their parents met, and for us so we never forget. You have already written about the ranch, about our life here. But not about us. Not the whole story, the truth of it. How we fell in love, how we built this life together. I want to capture it while the memories are still fresh, while we can still remember exactly how it felt." Robert was quiet for a moment, then nodded. I think that is a beautiful idea. Our story, written by you. It will be something to treasure. Emma began working on the manuscript the next week, diving into her memories of that first meeting, the days that followed, the moment when she realized she was in love. She interviewed Robert too, asking him about his perspective, his memories, the moments that stood out to him. She laughed and cried as she wrote, reliving the emotions of those early days. The manuscript took her 6 months to complete, written in stolen hours between her other responsibilities. When she finally finished, she had a document of nearly 200 pages, chronicling everything from Michael's death to their marriage to the birth of their children to the present day. She titled it simply The Message, because that was what had started it all. Emma showed the manuscript to Robert on their 15th wedding anniversary. They sat together in his study, and he read it straight through, his expression shifting as he moved through the pages. When he finished, he looked at Emma with tears in his eyes. "This is extraordinary," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You captured it all, everything I felt but could not put into words. This is us, Emma, our whole story. I wanted to get it right, to honor what we have built together." Robert pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "Thank you for writing this, for sharing your gift with me, for agreeing to stay all those years ago, for everything." They held each other in the study as the sun set outside, the manuscript resting on the desk beside them, their story preserved forever in Emma's careful handwriting. The years continued to pass, bringing the changes that time always brings. Michael grew into a young man who helped run the ranch with increasing skill and responsibility. Lily became a teacher, following in her aunt's footsteps, opening a school in White Pine. Daniel discovered a talent for breeding horses, developing his own line of working animals that were in high demand. Catherine showed signs of inheriting her mother's writing talent, filling notebooks with stories and observations. Emma's writing career flourished. She published 4 more books over the next decade, each one adding to her reputation. She received letters from readers across the country, people who said her stories had inspired them, had helped them through difficult times, had made them feel less alone. Emma treasured those letters, knowing that her words had reached people and mattered to them. Robert remained her partner in every sense, running the ranch with wisdom and care, raising their children to be good people, supporting Emma's work unconditionally. They weathered the inevitable challenges of life together, from financial difficulties to health scares to the heartbreak, when Mrs. Chen passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78. Through it all, their love remained strong, the foundation upon which everything else was built. When Emma turned 50, Robert organized a surprise party at the ranch, inviting family and friends from across Nevada and California. Emma's brother Daniel came with his wife and daughters. Many of the ranch hands from over the years attended, some now running their own operations. Neighbors and friends from White Pine filled the house and yard, celebrating Emma and the impact she had made on their community. Robert stood to make a toast, and the crowd quieted to listen. 20 years ago, a woman rode onto this ranch to deliver a message. She was exhausted and dusty and determined to keep a promise to a dying man. I asked her to stay, to help me write the story of the ranch. She agreed, and in doing so, she wrote a much more important story, the story of us, of our family, of this life we have built together. He turned to Emma, his eyes warm with love. "Emma Morrison, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You are an incredible mother, a brilliant writer, a savvy businesswoman, and most importantly, my best friend. I thank God every day that you chose to stay, that you took a chance on a rancher who was falling in love with you from the moment you rode into his life. Happy birthday, my love." Here is to many more years together." The crowd cheered and applauded, and Emma felt tears streaming down her face. She stood and kissed her husband, not caring that everyone was watching, too overcome with emotion to care about anything except telling Robert how much she loved him. As the party continued around them, Emma looked at the faces of the people she loved, the community she had become part of, the life she had built in this unlikely place. She thought about that young woman who had ridden to White Pine 20 years ago, carrying a blood-stained letter and a heavy heart. That Emma had been lost, adrift, unsure of her purpose or place in the world. This Emma, standing in her home surrounded by family and friends, celebrating 50 years of life and 20 years of marriage, knew exactly who she was and where she belonged. She was a wife, a mother, a writer, a rancher, a friend. She was loved and valued and fulfilled in ways she had never imagined possible, all because a dying soldier had asked her to deliver a message, and a rancher had asked her to stay. The years rolled on, bringing Emma and Robert into their 60s and beyond. They became grandparents, delighting in the children their own children gave them. Michael married a woman from California and had 3 sons who loved the ranch as much as their father did. Lily married a fellow teacher and had twin daughters who were whip-smart and beautiful. Daniel married late, at 35, to a quiet woman who understood his love for horses, and they had a son and daughter. Even Catherine eventually settled down, marrying a journalist she met while researching a story, and they had a daughter they named Emma. Robert's hair went gray, then white, but he remained strong and active, still riding out to check on the ranch operations even in his 70s. Emma's hands developed arthritis that made writing painful, but she persisted, using a new typewriter that Robert bought her to continue her work. Her books remained popular, and several were reprinted multiple times, ensuring her words would outlast her. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary surrounded by children and grandchildren, a joyous occasion that filled the ranch house to bursting. Emma looked around at the family they had created, the legacy they were leaving, and felt profound gratitude for the life she had lived. Late that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Emma and Robert sat on the porch as they had done countless times over the decades. The ranch spread out before them in the moonlight, peaceful and enduring. "You ever think about what your life would have been like if I had not asked you to stay?" Robert asked, his hand finding Emma's in the darkness. "Sometimes. But not with regret, only with gratitude that things turned out the way they did. This life with you, it has exceeded my wildest dreams. Mine too. You made me believe in love, Emma, in partnership, in the possibility of finding someone who truly understands you and accepts you exactly as you are." Emma squeezed his hand, feeling the familiar contours of his fingers against hers. "We built something good together, did we not? We built something extraordinary." They sat together in comfortable silence, 2 people who had loved each other for more than 40 years, who had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs, who had created a family and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. Emma Davies Morrison lived to be 82 years old. She remained sharp and engaged until the end, writing even when it was difficult, spending time with her growing family, still walking around the ranch she loved. When she passed peacefully in her sleep one spring morning in 1935, Robert was beside her, holding her hand as he had held it for so many years. Robert followed her 18 months later, his heart simply giving out one afternoon while he was watching the sunset from the porch they had shared. His children found him there, a peaceful expression on his face, and they knew he had gone to be with Emma. The Morrison Ranch continued on through their children and grandchildren, remaining in the family for generations. Emma's books were rediscovered in the 1970s and reprinted, finding new audiences who appreciated her authentic voice and heartfelt storytelling. The manuscript she had written about her and Robert's love story was eventually published by her great-granddaughter, becoming a bestseller and introducing Emma Morrison to a whole new generation of readers. In White Pine, Nevada, there is a historical marker at the site of the Morrison Ranch house, long since replaced by a newer structure. The marker tells the story of Emma Davies, who came to deliver a message in 1876 and stayed to build a life, a family, and a literary legacy that endures to this day. It speaks of how she met Robert Morrison, how they fell in love and created one of the most successful ranches in Nevada history. It mentions her books, her influence on Western literature, her role as a pioneer woman who balanced family and career in an era when few women did. But most importantly, it tells the story of a love that began with a simple request to stay and write a story, and grew into something that changed not just two lives but generations of lives that followed, because Emma did stay. She wrote their story, and in doing so, she wrote herself into history, leaving behind a legacy of words and love that would never be forgotten. The blood-stained letter that started it all was preserved by the family, kept in a place of honor as a reminder that sometimes the most profound changes in our lives come from the smallest acts of kindness, from keeping promises to dying strangers, from taking chances on love even when logic says it is too soon, too fast, too unlikely to work. Emma and Robert's story became the stuff of family legend, passed down through generations, a reminder that love can be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the best thing you can do is simply stay, open your heart, and see what happens next. Their graves sit side by side in the White Pine Cemetery, the headstones simple but elegant, bearing their names and the dates that bracketed their remarkable lives. Visitors still come occasionally, people who have read Emma's books and want to pay their respects to the woman who brought the Old West to life with her words. And if you stand there quietly, in the Nevada sunshine with the wind whistling through the sage, you can almost imagine a young woman riding up on a tired horse, carrying a letter and a promise, about to meet the man who would change her life forever. You can almost see them falling in love, building a ranch, raising a family, growing old together under those endless western skies. It was a simple story, really. She came to deliver a message. The rancher asked her to stay and write their story. And from that simple beginning, a love story for the ages was born, one that would endure as long as people still believed in the power of love, commitment, and the courage to take a chance on an uncertain future. Emma and Robert Morrison's story reminds us that the best adventures often start with a single choice, a moment of bravery, a willingness to step into the unknown. They remind us that love is built not in grand gestures but in daily choices to show up, to be present, to support and cherish each other through whatever life brings. Their story reminds us that we all have stories worth telling, lives worth documenting, legacies worth leaving behind. And that sometimes the person who helps us see our own worth and potential is the same person who holds our heart. She came to deliver a message. He asked her to stay. And together, they wrote a story that would last forever.